idea of African spirituality is very problematic because number one, the word Africa is a Latin/Greek word, right? It's what the Romans referred to what we call modern day Tunisia, and then eventually just called the whole place Africa. So it's a word that we adopted from Europe. So then if the word Africa is an adopted word, it's a European word, what does that make African spirituality? Right? We can say it's actually European spirituality. It's not African spirituality. Africans never had national or continental consciousness. They never saw themselves as Africans. They never saw themselves as this one entity that has the same belief, that has the same culture. Absolutely, there was always diversity. And people actually, if you were closer, that's all you actually saw, is that this is my nation and I'm living in harmony with this nation, but I'm at war with the other tribes. The other tribes are different from me. The other tribes have different cosmology than me, right? So there's no such thing as African spirituality, and we've debunked that over and over. You can't actually say spirituality has some kind of a geographic location, because when we talk about spirituality, we're talking about something that we can access with our spirits. God is spirit, and therefore it is the spiritual side. It's got nothing to do with black or white. It's got nothing to do with being African. It is the spiritual side that has no color. So that's one of the major problem that comes from this thing. The idea that there are some ancestors who lived a very terrible life. Let's say you were a murderer. When you go to the afterlife, you can't be united with your family, and then you're an isolated spirit that then is roaming, doesn't find rest, and he comes and causes trouble on his own people or his family and so on. So he holds to that idea. Some ancestors are good, some are bad. We've just got to discern how we deal with these people. But these people, when they are rejected, they can actually bring a lot of harm to people. So straight away, that's where I see a lot of problems, because for me, how does one fix the bad things that they've done in this world? Right? And some people think we have to do a ritual to now release these ancestors who are now bound up and rejected by their families. And it's the idea that you can fix. You'll see a lot of people actually will say, my parents never actually got married, and so they've passed away, and now they because of this thing, they're causing problems. So we must have a wedding for them. Right? So what never happened, we must now fix. We have the power to fix what they didn't fix. Now, this for me would then create a problem to say, man, I can live my life as a murderer. It's very similar to the idea of reincarnation. I can live my life as a murderer and go there, be isolated to my family, but someone's going to come and fix it. So I always emphasize the idea of African spirituality, or the way that African spirituality is promoted. It always avoids accountability. It's someone has to slaughter on my behalf to fix the mess that I caused. But actually what we say in Christianity is that God will hold you accountable for your own actions, right? I think there's a scripture in Hebrews that says that it is appointed for man to die once and then to face judgment. So we don't have another life like a cat that has 9 lives where we can mess it up here and then somehow it's going to be fixed there. But we need to actually repent and turn towards God while we're here. While there's still an opportunity, there isn't someone who's going to fix it back then. But also the idea that you can have relatives who then come back and wreak havoc in your life is also saying that everything that's wrong in my life is because of something else. It's never me. It's never my responsibility. It's never me that's at fault. So that's where the issue is that it always avoids consequences, because even a murderer can say, no, I'm doing this because there's an evil spirit that's causing me to do these things, shifting the blame all the time. African people use candles before white people came. You see, this is the problem where people say, let's reject everything white, but then take all these candles that come from Europe and say, we're going to practice our spirituality with it. We're going to say we hate everything Europe, like Christianity, but we're going to take the word Africa and define our spirituality with it. You know, it is always inconsistent and actually not genuine, because you are just picking and choosing the things that you like and rejecting the things. In fact, you are rejecting the spiritual side, and you're taking everything else, but you're saying, let's reject the spiritual side that maybe comes outside of Africa, but we'll take the candles, we'll take the word Africa, and we'll call ourselves African people. I mean, that speaks to your identity. Give us an indigenous word, since we're all about the indigenous, since we're all about going back to the original, give us an original name for Africa that people used to use. Then we will understand that there was this continental consciousness. Because some people will say the name Alkebulan or something was a name that was used, but actually a lot of people have been sort of tricked by African scholars like Dr. Yusuf Ben, who actually invented the word and said that he had traveled to Nubia and found that that's the word. But actually, there's no such thing, right? There's no inscription with the word Alkebulan anywhere in Africa, right? It doesn't exist. It's a made-up word, but that was made by African scholars. There's no indigenous word for the continent of Africa, the same way that there's no indigenous word for South Africa. A lot of people say it's Azania. Azania is as foreign as anything. It's an Arab word that has nothing to do with indigenous Africa. And guys, I mentioned this over and over in my previous videos, that African spirituality sees everything as one unit. God, creation, and humanity are all one thing. If the deities can occupy creation, then that means then that creation and God are sort of linked in a sense. But if I can also pray to the ancestors instead of praying to God, then the human beings that are ancestors have some God-like status as well. I mentioned a couple of times in this channel as well that Zulu people don't even have a God concept. Whenever they talk about Umvelinqang, they are talking about the first ancestors, right? Even uNkulunkulu is actually would be classified under isithunyo. So in the Zulus, you have Umvelinqang who falls under the ancestral side, which goes with the Inyanga side, but also even uNkulunkulu is actually said to be just one of these sort of angelic beings, deities, that are not really God, but more like angelic beings. So even Zulus, I think out of all the African tribes, they actually don't even have a God concept of a supreme being. And so this is why Christianity, I think for me, is very much different, because I can speak to God directly. Thank God for Jesus Christ, that when he died on the cross, the veil that was in the temple that separated us from the presence of God, that someone else had to go on my behalf. Now I can speak to God directly. I don't have to go to some mountain to access the divine. I can speak to God where I am. There are no holy sites in Christianity. You can't even say I'm going to Israel to worship as a pilgrimage or some sort. But actually, God is close to us, man. I can sit here and pray to God and connect with him. I don't have to go through Imboni. I don't have to go through the ancestors. I don't have to go through Isangoma. I don't have to go through even his Tunyo. I can speak to him directly, because this is why he created us, so that we would have this relationship with him, that we would connect with him, right? This is what Jesus was saying to the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman in John chapter 4. Where he said, they were debating, saying the Jews worship in Jerusalem, the Samaritans worship in Samaria. But Christ was saying there's a time where you won't worship in Jerusalem or Samaria. And God is seeking worshipers who will worship him in spirit and in truth, because God is spirit. And if God is spirit, then it doesn't matter whether you're black or white. We all can connect with God the same way. There's no African spirituality. There's no unique or different way. I mean, think about it like this. If God had a different spirituality for all races, to say, okay, the Christians can come to me directly, but for those who believe in African indigenous spirituality, we're going to say to them, no, you need to go through someone else. So that means Christians have more access to God, and the other people have to climb different steps and ladders before they can get to God. I mean, how fair would God be for him to actually make it difficult for other people to access him and much easier for others? Some people would have to sacrifice and offer and pay a lot of money for these sort of rituals to get to God. But this is why Christ died, so that we wouldn't have to sacrifice, right? The sacrificial system is fulfilled in him. When he died on the cross, his sacrifice was a perfect sacrifice that was enough for all time. It nullified the need to sacrifice bulls and goats in order for us to connect with God or to receive favor from God. So this is why Jesus Christ comes, and he makes God more accessible to everyone. And the Africans have always had an aspiration to connect with God. But the problem is these obstacles that have been man-made, that have been put in front of them, that make it more difficult. Instead of actually saying there's an easier way, because Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, man. If you come through me, you will have access to God. I am God, right? If you speak to me, you have already accessed the divine. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So this is why, for me, I think that what they call African spirituality is actually religion, because you have to go and worship in mountains. You have to go through other people. You have to pay a lot of money. You have to have fear that the ancestors are angry at you. You have all this baggage that's unnecessary, and Christ wants to liberate you from all these things so that you don't have to go to the mountain. You don't have to go through people. You can actually access God directly through Jesus Christ.